when it comes to certain interests, if you like skydiving and you like that rush of jumping out of the plane and feeling adrenaline, I feel adrenaline when I go ghost hunting. I get so excited, for that one or two moment encounter, or, hearing a voice on a recorder, or, seeing a shadow figure. It's just very interesting for me.
Welcome back to the Ghost City Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Nealon, founder of Ghost City Tours, the #1 rated ghost tour company in the entire world. Go to ghostcitytours.com to book one of our world famous tours today. On today's episode, we're talking with paranormal investigator and author, Gina Black. So today we're going to be talking with Gina about all things paranormal. Now, she's based out of Southern Florida, so she has a lot of spooky locations that she's often visiting with her team there. Now, during the course of her paranormal investigation career, she also developed a love for cemeteries, and she wrote a book about it. So we're going to talk about ghosts, cemeteries, and I think there's even something in there about Bob's Burgers. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode with Gina Black. All right, so Gina, it's nice to have you on the show today. And I'm excited to have you because Carissa has been trying to get you on the show for a little while. I know that. She's like, I'm going to try to get Gina. And at first I was like, who's Gina? And because she just kept saying Gina, like I'm supposed to know you by name. But then once I realized who you were, I was like, oh yeah, I think she'd be an excellent guest here on the Ghost City Podcast. So welcome to the show, Gina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So where are you joining us from today?
I'm actually in South Florida, close to Miami area.
And South Florida, that's not exactly known for a lot of ghostly activity, or is it?
Well, I would have to say that there's a lot of hidden gems in South Florida. We had a lot of, development with the Florida Keys, rum running, activity during speakeasy era. So there is actually a lot of interesting haunted locations in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. And of course, I travel all over the state, so I'm very familiar with some of the more, I would say, well-known haunts in St. Augustine and beyond. So
I imagine Florida has a lot more ghosts than normal because you guys have Florida Man. And from what I understand, Florida Man is really good at killing himself in like a lot of different bizarre ways. Alligators, stop signs, all that other kind of stuff. Maybe. But to bring it back to the serious side of things, what are some of your favorite places to investigate down there in Florida?
So there is a museum that my paranormal team and I host some charity events at, and we host a regular ghost investigation for people to come join us. And that's called the History Fort Lauderdale Museum. It's in downtown Fort Lauderdale, and it is a collective of properties. It includes the first hotel and a pioneer home, as well as an old schoolhouse. And I've been investigating there for a few years now, and it is by far one of the most active locations that I've had the pleasure of investigating. And so we do that pretty regularly. There's also a really cool train museum in Miami called Gold Coast Train Museum, and it's a collective of all sorts of really cool old trains, some of which were involved in World War II, and some that kind of went back and forth across the United States. And there's even an old presidential car. So that's pretty neat. And we have, some interesting haunted hotels as well. And, there's a lot of interesting beaches, haunted cemeteries, and we have a lot of really cool locations in the Florida Keys as well. I know a lot of people are familiar with Robert the Doll. He's located in Key West.
Do you believe in Robert the Doll? I always ask people this when they bring him up. Do you really think that doll's haunted?
I have a really interesting experience with Robert the Doll, so I'd love to share. And so I investigated in November of 2024, and I went down, I did the investigation on a Sunday night. There was only a few attendees, and the person who was running the investigation basically said, to my surprise, hey, when you're investigating with Robert, just be cool, be calm, collected, but respectful. Do not ask for permission when it comes to taking pictures or videos. And I said, that's really strange, because I was always under the impression that you guys were always advertising to ask permission. And he explained that recently they had changed their policy as a museum, and they were asking that people not ask permission, because he said that the act of asking permission was in fact inviting negative energy to occur. So they officially changed their policy. I did not ask permission. I was respectful, and I got some interesting paranormal activity. So it wasn't a ton, but I investigated around the doll for quite a bit of time while I was there. I would say maybe, about 2 hours. And I, towards the end of this time, I was getting a little, kind of frustrated because I wasn't getting any responses. So I sort of said, hey, the person I'm with doesn't believe in you, Robert. He doesn't believe you're haunted, but I think you are, buddy. I think you are pretty cool. And I got a little giggle on my portal box. So it was like a childlike giggle that came through the portal. And then as I was getting ready to leave, we were kind of walking around a little bit around the area. And I got on my Ovilus device, it said Robert. And I thought that was pretty cool. So I went back and I said bye to him. And, as far as is the doll haunted? Maybe. I think it's one of those situations very much like Annabelle, who's another haunted doll, where it's so overhyped at this point that it becomes so ingrained in everyone's mind as being such an intense situation that no matter what happens, you're going to think that something negative is going to happen. And you're going to take,
I was going to say, I was going to say, we know, and me personally know all about that. So when we had Annabelle come to New Orleans, I ended up getting like 60, 70 death threats. Like legit death threats, because that's when the plantation burned down and all that other stuff. And you might have heard that, oh, Annabelle did it, which is just absurd. But yeah, people love to attribute essentially anything spooky, I guess within 100 miles of the doll, to the doll. I'm one of those people, I'm not sure that any of these dolls are haunted. And I could be wrong, because I'm a believer in ghosts, like no doubt. But there's parts of me, it's like, really, like the Robert the Doll thing, if you didn't ask permission, something bad would happen to you. To me, that just doesn't, like, really, like, you think that ghost has nothing better to do.
Yeah. And I also think, it becomes part of the local folklore. But now with podcasting and, the internet, we have so much more access to these stories, and people, they become infamous. And I think the idea is more scary than the actual situation. And if you go in and it's the power of, your mind thinking that something bad's going to happen. So that if you leave there and something does happen to you, you're going to attribute that to the doll. And I just kind of feel like that's a little bit on the crazy side. And I also don't think that dolls have the capability of getting up and running around and doing anything nefarious. But
I mean, they will here in the future once Elon Musk has his way with them.
Yeah, that's for sure.
They'll be doing all kind of things. A lot of it not appropriate, I'm sure. Well, you mentioned this idea of, people kind of coming in with these preconceived notions or having these preconceived notions of this doll being a certain way, and therefore any experience they have reinforces that, whether or not it's actually because of the doll or not. Do you think the same thing's happening in haunted locations themselves?
I do. I do think that is absolutely a possibility. And there was an interesting experiment called the Philip experiment. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
The Philip experiment happened, it was done at a conference in Canada. I don't know the exact year off the top of my head, but the idea of the experiment was that a group of investigators was given the background on a spirit, and the spirit's name was Philip. This was all fabricated. It was made up for the experiment, but all these investigators were given background information, what Philip was like, what year they lived, and things along that line. And they started investigating, and they started gathering evidence from this ghost that was named Philip. And it was an interesting phenomenon, because the idea was that these investigators believed so much so that they were interacting with the spirit that they sort of created a spirit. Now, I think that that's absolutely a possibility when it comes to certain locations. I think that that's why investigating with a variety of equipment is important. So that way, if you hear a sound and you get a spike in EMF and you get a reading on one of your motion sensor devices, if you have 3 or 4 points of evidence, it's harder to debunk. And, I would say that's a little bit more credible. But I absolutely think that some people sort of create the idea of spirits because they're so overhyped when they visit locations.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet that happens as well. And that also gives me a really good idea. I think that we should do the Philip experiment here at Ghost City Tours, except for Philip is the new CEO. And Philip is a really nice guy and everybody loves him. But nobody's really seen him in person. And he's on Slack all the time, though. I think that, yeah.
Yeah, you can add a little mailbox to the office room and, give them an extension. And
I think we're gonna have I think we're gonna the next one episode we'll be announcing the new CEO of Ghost City Tours, Philip.
So we actually did our version of the Philip experiment a couple of weeks ago. We called it the Baylor experiment. Isn't that right, Paul?
Yeah, it's you can see it on our YouTube channel, Ghost City Tours at youtube.com.
Yay. Well, how did that go?
It went about as well as you thought it might.
Oh, okay.
But we do have a new ghost at the Ghost City headquarters called Baylor, so there's that.
Oh, cool. So I just totally dismissed everything you said. Oh, cool. And we're moving on. That's great, guys. So awesome. Back to you, Gina. Totally messing with you guys. So, how long have you been doing the paranormal investigation thing, Gina?
So I've always been interested in haunted locations. I've been taking ghost tours since my teens. And I want to say around 2016, 2017, for one year, my husband bought me some paranormal equipment for a Christmas gift, and I sort of dabbled in it. And then I would say around 2020 is when I started doing it a little bit more. And then I got onto a paranormal team around 2021. And now I'm on my own paranormal team that I co-founded, and I do it all the time. I would say I investigate, 3 or 4 times a month. I'm out on the road. I do it when I'm out of town. If I'm on vacation, I kind of do a multifaceted vacation of here, let's have a good time exploring the city and going out to eat, but let's also take the ghost tour and check out the cemeteries. So I'm always doing this, and it's truly a passion of mine.
So what keeps you going? For a lot of people, especially if they've been doing it for a number of years, you tend to get bored of something, whether it's a hobby or an interest, and you move on. So why are you still engaged? What is it that keeps you wanting to find that next haunted location or that next piece of evidence? What is that for you?
Well, I think, when it comes to certain interests, if you like skydiving and you like that rush of jumping out of the plane and feeling adrenaline, I feel adrenaline when I go ghost hunting. I get so excited, for that 1 or 2 moment encounter, or, hearing a voice on a recorder, or, seeing a shadow figure. It's just very interesting for me. And I would love to document and research and meet people that have had experiences. It's just something that I just really do enjoy doing. And it's really nice when you get to meet other like-minded people, because growing up, I didn't have too many friends that were interested in this. And thankfully, my husband is very patient, because he puts up with it. He doesn't love it, but he supports me. And I found a group of like-minded folks that I'm able to investigate with now, and they make it a lot of fun. So it's something that I truly look forward to, and I don't see myself getting tired of it anytime soon. So,
no, I imagine that must be nice, having friends and stuff. Sad face. But so, at what point was it after you began doing the paranormal investigations, or before, where something happened and you just knew that this was real? Because, of course, we have skeptics and believers, all that kind of stuff. Were you always a believer, or was there a part of you that was that skeptic, like, oh, ghosts aren't real, and then something happened to you and that triggered all of this? How did that happen for you?
I think just the more I started investigating, the more I was experiencing things that I couldn't explain. And, when it came to, having a really profound experience on a location in Savannah, I got to investigate the Sorrel Weed House, which is a very famous haunted location. And I had a really, really profound experience in the carriage house that really kind of changed the way I looked at investigating, and made me want to investigate more, made me want to duplicate what I experienced there other places. And it just sort of, for me, I really wanted to just learn more about what was happening. I wanted to learn more about equipment. I wanted to learn more about how things worked, how to debunk, how to do things more in a professional way. So that really kind of became more of the driving factor for me. And what really kind of got me interested was that location.
Well, what was that profound experience?
So the Sorrel Weed House has been on a bunch of ghost hunting shows. it was on, I think the first time I saw it was on Ghost Adventures. And, I knew a little bit about the story, but the background was the house was originally used as a war barracks during the Revolutionary War. And then it became a mansion. They built it up and made it into a mansion. And the husband was a doctor. He was doing kind of some shady experiments, maybe in the basement, maybe people who couldn't afford to see a doctor. They were going to him for some work, but a lot of things kind of occurred in the basement that maybe weren't so kosher. And he was having an affair with one of the enslaved people on the property. This was definitely not something that was mutual because she was an enslaved person. And his wife found out, and his wife jumped off the roof. And then shortly thereafter, the enslaved woman was also found unalived. And, it was one of those things that, it marked the property. It made it, infamous. And for years afterwards, many rumors would go about around Savannah that the place was haunted. And the owners of the property now, it's a museum, they do tours, and they also host paranormal investigations. So that's just a little bit on the background. So on this investigation, I got to explore the whole house, and then we were able to get into the carriage house, which is where the enslaved people lived. And I was just with 3 other people. And the docent, when she opened the building up and she let us in, she just said on our way out, she said, "Hey guys, when you're here, just keep it light. This was a very happy place. This was a refuge for these people. This was where they would have dinner after a hard day. This is where they would relax. They would sing. They would have their, cooking." And she said, "Please just keep it light because we like the energy here to be light." So that was great advice. And, we were investigating, and I was with my husband, who's a singer. And I said, "Hey, why don't we see if you sing a song, if we get any reaction?" Because the woman mentioned singing. They like to sing up here. So he's like looking at me. He's going, "What do I sing?" And I thought, okay, I don't know, maybe something bluesy. Maybe, he knows some Elvis songs. So I said, "Why don't you sing Blue Suede Shoes?" And so he started singing Blue Suede Shoes. And almost immediately we started getting some voices on the spirit box. There was it sounded like an older man that said, "I don't trust him." And then there was a little kid, it sounded like a younger person, said, "He's okay." And then what sounded like a female humming the tune. It was like back to back to back. And it was just so chilling. And, he stopped singing and he's looking at me and I'm looking at him and the other people in the room. And we just kind of felt this very interesting shift in the energy is the only way I could describe it. It felt like we weren't alone. And there wasn't anything afterwards. There really wasn't much before that. But it was just, as soon as he started singing, all of a sudden the activity happened and then it stopped. And it was just, we kind of felt like we made a connection. And we felt like, hey, maybe they appreciated the music. Maybe they appreciated us. And yeah, it's okay for them to not be sure about us too. We're people in their space. So it was a cool experience for all of us. And it made me want to kind of duplicate that and experiment with, that kind of thing in other places, maybe singing, maybe dancing, maybe playing music. It doesn't have to just be, is there anyone here with us? Are you a man or a woman?
Do you know that you're dead?
It's more than that. They were people. So it was a really, really profound experience for me.
Yeah, I used to live in Savannah, Georgia. But no, the Sorrel Weed House is an awesome place. Have you spent a lot of time in Savannah, or was that kind of like your one trip there? Or
I've been a couple of times, and I also investigated before it was closed down the Moon River Brewing Company.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I got to investigate that, and that's really the 2 investigations I've done there. But I've also, I tried to make my way around. Went through Bonaventure. I'm into photography, so that was a dream come true to see all the beautiful sculpture in there. And I just love the downtown area and the old homes and getting to see, the old architecture. It's such a beautiful city. It really is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I always tell people I have no plans of. I live right outside of New Orleans. We get that really hot, oppressive summer, probably how you guys get, where it's like 95 degrees every day, 100% humidity. And I'm from the north, so anything above 70 degrees, and I have to I'm like, oh my God, it's so hot. But my whole point was I always said that if I did leave here and move anywhere into the South again, I would move back to Savannah in a heartbeat. But I can't move anywhere in the South. It's too damn hot down here. I don't like this. Like
Savannah gets pretty hot too in the summertime.
Oh, I know. That's why I would never move there. But if I had to move back to somewhere in the South, it would absolutely be Savannah. I think what I always like best about Savannah, not only, and by the way, I actually moved to Savannah because it was haunted.
I love that.
I didn't even plan on stopping in Savannah. I was just, kind of doing a road trip. And there's just something about that downtown area when you walk around, it just feels different than anywhere I've ever been in my life. And, like you said, the beautiful architecture, the old mansions, the squares, I don't know if it's that or if it's some other type of energy, but there's definitely something very unique and special about the historic district of Savannah. And I do miss it every now and then. And here in New Orleans, everybody thinks the French Quarter is better. It's not. They're like, oh, the French Quarter.
It's similar though. It has a similar kind of vibe. I noticed that, I feel like they're sister cities.
Yeah, except for one's drunk and dirty. And the other one's like refined and, mostly pretty. But I get where you're coming from. So you mentioned New Orleans and you said they're similar. So have you been here?
Yes, I've been twice now and I absolutely love it. I actually was there last February for my 40th birthday and I got to do the weekend. It was right before the Super Bowl. And there were so many parades. We got to see the Chewbacca parade.
Chewbacchus. Is that Chewbacchus?
Chewbacchus.
I think what you're referring to is called
or something.
No, Bacchanal. Wait, now you're
Chewbaccanal.
Oh my God, now you're fucking me up. It's Chewbacchus, right, guys?
Chewbacchus, yes.
And then, but you blended another one, Bacchanal. Is that another one, or is it kind of Bacchus?
Bacchus is another one.
I think that's a Roman term for a really crazy party, right?
No, I think he's the grape guy.
Bacchus was the god of wine and debauchery, I believe, and there is a parade named after him.
Wine and debauchery. That sounds like my early 20s or New Orleans now. So when you were here, like one, did you come here because it's haunted, or were you just trying to check out the city?
Well, it was my second time there, and the first time I was there, I was, I went to a couple of the the cemeteries that are right downtown. I did the St. Louis number 2, I believe. I didn't do number 1. And I did the, kind of the downtown, the Garden District and, all downtown. And then this time around, I was there for the parade and also, because it was my 40th, I wanted a big party. And
every time you say 40, we're going to edit it so it says 22.
And I got to do a little bit of investigating, and I got to visit where Anne Rice is buried. And I'm a huge fan of her. She's one of my absolute favorite authors ever. And I got to visit the Bloody Mary Museum, which has the apartment where that famous true crime case, the Zach and Addie case, where that happened. And I kind of did a little investigating, I asked if it was okay and they said, sure. There was nobody there. So I did a little investigating and it was a very eerie experience.
Because you know what happened up there, right?
Oh yeah, I do know what happened up there. It was a really infamous true crime case after Hurricane Katrina, where a boyfriend butchered and unalived a girlfriend that he was living with, and she was found on the stove and in a bathroom, kind of in separate containers. And the apartment was, I believe there was a lot of controversy because some people blamed the shop below because it was a metaphysical shop below. And people were blaming that. And it was really just, the guy was off his meds. It was during the hurricane and, the aftermath. And, he was drinking, he was doing drugs, and he was off his medication. And, it was a volatile situation. But the building was purchased by the Bloody Mary Museum. And now that space upstairs that was their former apartment is kind of like a shrine in a way. They made altars out of all of the spaces where they found her body.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. They, the woman who bought that took a lot of flack here in New Orleans for kind of turning it into like a tourist attraction.
I can see both sides of it.
I can too. I'm not taking her side, or nor am I against her. It's just I remember that was a big hoopla.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big rigmarole. Wait, no, that's probably even the wrong word. And for a while,
Hoopla works.
hoopla. There we go. Well, talking about New Orleans and something that you brought up earlier, you wrote a book on cemeteries, and New Orleans just happens to be known as the City of the Dead. I mean, I guess everybody calls their city City of the Dead, but New Orleans in particular, and you might be able to tell me if I'm right or not, does New Orleans have more cemeteries than any other city in the country, or is it?
I am not sure of that statistic off the top of my head, but it is one of the cities that has the most mausoleums and above ground crypts than any other city. But I'm not sure about the number of cemeteries. You might be correct with that.
I mean, we have it seems like every 3 blocks there's a new cemetery, especially if you go out towards, like where you said where Anne Rice is buried, out there in Metairie Cemetery.
Yes.
Yeah, Metairie and Woodlawn and St. Louis 3 and St. Louis 2. And I mean, that part of town, they actually call it the cemeteries. I would assume, if I didn't know you at all, that the reason that you're interested in cemeteries is because you're interested in ghosts. But did one come before the other?
So I've always been interested in ghosts. I've always been fascinated by just Gothic culture and spooky stories. And, I'm also an artist. I'm a photographer. And what got me into the cemetery thing was actually kind of an interesting thing. During the pandemic, when everybody was kind of, shut off from the world, I was getting a little cooped up in my house, and I took my camera to a cemetery because I knew it was going to be quiet and I wanted to just be creative for a little bit. And I started taking pictures and I started editing those pictures. And I just started noticing a lot of my photos had similar symbolisms in them. If you take a picture, if you go to a cemetery, you're going to see a lot of similar symbolism, maybe ivy or roses or open books or wreaths. And I just started looking into what those things meant. And it sort of brought me down a rabbit hole that got me into studying symbolism, mostly of, Victorian era cemetery symbolism. And of course, as a spooky person, I would bring my spirit box with me and I'll just turn it on just to give myself, a little white noise. And sometimes I would hear voices and things come through. But in South Florida in particular, we have a lot of cemeteries that are said to be haunted because during the 1940s, there was a really, really bad hurricane that no one really was able to predict was coming. And there was massive casualties. And a lot of cemeteries actually have mass graves. And that is one of the reasons why some people suspect that there's hauntings in cemeteries out here. And through some of my research and also places like St. Augustine that had mass graves for people, during pandemic times of yellow fever, Spanish flu, things like that. That's a point of, some people argue why some of the cemeteries in St. Augustine are haunted is these ideas of mass graves, because these spirits are not marked, they weren't given a proper burial, things like that. And so, sometimes I'll bring my equipment with me when I'm out walking around. And it just sort of became like a fun activity for me to do on my own during that time. And then when the world started opening back up, I thought, hey, maybe I'll share some of these pictures online. And that's kind of where I got into, even thinking about the idea of writing a book was because there was interest in it.
Like, what are some things that you discovered about cemeteries that might actually surprise people? Like, especially the symbology, because I think that most people, they'll walk through a cemetery and they'll, like, you've been to Bonaventure, right? Beautiful cemetery. And I think that's what people do. They just walk through and they're like, oh, this is beautiful. But if they really looked at the mausoleums or the family tombs or the headstones, they'd be amazed at the amount of symbols that have real meaning that they're not even aware of.
I wasn't aware of it either. And, I have an art degree. I love sculpture, and that was sort of what drew me to it. But then when I started noticing these things and I started researching, I said, wow, it's a whole hidden world. And long story really short, you could read it, the whole thing in my book. But during the Victorian era, the mid 1800s to the early 1900s, it was basically a love language for the Victorians to commemorate a loved one with their cemetery plot. And there was so many reasons why people would pass away early in life, whether, you were lucky if you made it to adulthood, because children were taken out by all kinds of diseases and, hardly any medical, access, things like that. You didn't have the same kind of hospitals and doctors access that we have today. And, there were the Civil War, you have all kinds of, situations going on where people, it became a part of their life to have to deal with death. And it became a status symbol in a way. If you had a loved one that passed away, you would have this beautiful, magnificent stone or a mausoleum or some sort of, commemorative situation. And you wanted yours to really mean something. So, then comes in the idea of cemetery symbolism. And there was a whole love language when it came to flowers, when it came to, different, scriptures and, religious aspects of it. And it became a way for people to express themselves and leave their mark, because so many people were passing away so young. You wanted to leave your mark on the world. You wanted people to remember you. So that cemeteries became so important for that. And for me, when I was researching and I was getting, out there and taking photos, I would talk to people that I met at the cemetery. I know that sounds kind of strange, but I would, hey, volunteers, people that are doing tours, they love to share this information with people. A lot of old timers that have been there for so long, they want to share this information and pass it along. And I just met some great people. And I would take tours, if I'm out of town, I would, talk to these folks that work there. And I just found out so much interesting, hidden meaning. And I would say one that really struck me that was interesting was when I was in Highgate Cemetery in London. I befriended my tour guide. I just, was chatting her up the whole time. And she said, I have something to show you I bet you've never seen. And I said, oh, you're going to try me here because I've been around the world. I've seen a lot of cemeteries. She goes, you've never seen this one. And I hadn't. It was a pelican. So on the headstone, there was a large pelican, and there were some smaller pelicans at the front of this larger pelican.
Those are called baby pelicans.
Yeah. So, well, babies, little babies. Right. So the mother pelican is actually ripping out her flesh and feeding it to her young. And she said, so this represents the idea of, Jesus, when you go to mass and you take the body of Christ. This was somebody who was religious, but it was also somebody who was a mother who would sacrifice herself for her children. And I just thought, my mind was blown. I'm like, wow, this is really metal. I'm looking at this sculpture of, a bird ripping itself apart and feeding its babies. But then, the idea of like, wow, that's so incredibly beautiful at the same time was very mind blowing. So that was cool.
Do you know where else you can see that, or something very similar on the Louisiana state flag?
Really? Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Google. Wait, I'm right. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the same thing. It's the mom pelican feeding the babies from her chest.
Yeah. We'll throw it up in post for the audience.
Yeah. It's the state flag, Louisiana. But I've never seen that in a cemetery, though. Like, to see that in a cemetery would be very unique and very cool.
I did a little bit of looking online, and I was only able to find one other one in the United States, but it's more popular in the UK.
Right? Because they have so many pelicans.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's a symbol that they use. But another one that was really cool for me as somebody who has, I have some English, Scottish roots. I was noticing the thistle flower, and thistle is something that's very popular in Scottish, people that have Scottish blood. And, I started looking into what that meant. And there was this famous story of the Scots fighting the Norse. And, there was this battle going on, and the soldiers were really tired, but they didn't have anywhere to really hide. So they thought, well, why don't we sleep in this field that's surrounded by thistle? Because thistle has these little tiny thorns that, surround the flower. So they said, this is the best, protection for us. So we'll hear if anybody's coming. And sure enough, the Norse didn't know about the spikes, and they took off their boots because they wanted to come, rush through and get this sleeping, battalion. And they step on the thistle and they cry out because they didn't know about the spikes, and they give their position away. And because of this battle, the Scots won, and they overtook the Norse, and they were able to, hold down their land. It became part of this, the Scottish coat of arms. And it's a very popular symbolism for people with Scottish heritage. So I thought that was so cool because I had never heard of that before. And once I knew, I started seeing it more and more. And then it made sense with the last names I would see on the graves. And it's just like, once you know the language, you can start picking out these little hidden secrets. And it just became kind of like a treasure hunt. I always grew up reading things like Nancy Drew and, all these like fun mystery books. And it became almost like solving mysteries, solving, these little hidden things that you had to find on your own.
Well, once you know those, it actually helps you out in the cities as well. So you mentioned Savannah, for example. There's a lot of old homes, especially some of those old mansions where they have a lot of that same symbolism on them, like the Mercer Williams house. Like there's a lot of rumors that the symbols carved into the stones on the house are actually Dionysus related, as in like, oh, there was like, sex parties here and all this other kind of stuff. I don't know that there were anything. But one of my favorites, and I can't remember the name of the building, but it's about 2 blocks off Bay Street. But right above the entrance to the building, there's a whole beehive. Like if you type in Beehive, building, Savannah, it might come up. I forget what the name of the building is. And honestly, I'm blanking here because I don't even remember what the meaning of it was. But all I remember is like, oh my God, that's so cool that's what it meant. I think it meant like a secret gathering place or something, like a beehive, right? Like it was like a symbol that the people in the know would know, like, hey, this is where our people gather. Or so it was something like that.
Well, there were some secret societies that use symbols like that, but also it was another popular one is the idea of Christianity, being kind of like a hive, being a collective that is, working for a greater good. And, the bees, they're all workers, but they're working for God. And so that was another one too. So it depends on the context, but yeah, it could have been like a little secret flag for anybody that was looking for, a secret society.
You could like start a company and do like a treasure, not treasure hunt. What do they call it? Like a scavenger hunt.
Yes.
Where like you have to find all the symbols in the city. And then
that's fun. I like that.
I actually might do that, but only if it wasn't part of a group. I hate being around people. Like I can't even stand being around these guys. Totally kidding, guys. They know I'm kidding. So what's next for you? So you are going down this paranormal investigation road. You said that this is something that you can't imagine yourself getting tired of. You've wrote a book on cemeteries. You're a photographer. Like what's next for Gina Black? Are you planning on expanding the paranormal empire? Or are you going to write another book? Like what is the next 5 years?
Plans. I have
yeah.
And
don't tell me like top secret ones, that.
No, I'm not going to tell you the top secret, but I do want to write another book. And I was torn when I was approached for this book. I was approached by a publisher for the book that I wrote and, about the cemetery symbolism. And, I was speaking with that publisher about possibly doing something ghost hunted related, but we thought, we both, after, talking about it, we felt that, that was the right direction at the time. But I do want to write a book about my experiences because I've been, all over the United States. I've been all over, in other countries. And I think it's, as far as a perspective of a paranormal investigator, what happened on the investigation, real talk, was it super haunted? Was it all just folklore? Was it just a great story? Because I've been to some locations that were not as haunted as they were hyped up to be, so I want to just put up something out there about locations that people would know and what happened to me when I was there, maybe a little bit about the backstory of the location, even possibly interview some people. But I wanted to go, explore that a little bit. And also I just got a new camera and I'm kind of dipping my toe into some longer form content because I'm mostly the Instagram girly. I'm always making reels and videos on there for myself and my team, but I want to do some long form content. So I'm looking at, maybe possibly, testing out the waters of YouTube. And I've also really wanted to do a podcast. I love telling stories, focusing on folklore, the importance of folklore, and what that does for, museums and haunted locations. It really does kind of help these places survive, and gets younger people interested, in checking these places out and getting some people in the door. And I see the value in that. And I know that as somebody who likes spooky things, if I'm in a city, I'm going to look up what are the spooky places in that city. And I'm going to hit all those places. And I think other people might be interested in that too. So these are some of my ideas, but, I always have a million things cooking, and I'm always, working on something. So hopefully, maybe in 2026, you'll see some developments.
I know that feeling, having something always cooking. I mean, the podcast thing, I mean, that's kind of like a low barrier, entry, low barrier to entry kind of thing. And they're kind of fun. Like, we started doing this podcast. We started recording it, I don't know, 5-6 months ago, but we really only started promoting it and talking about it like last 3 months. And I was kind of shocked at how well it did. Like, we had like 1.1 million views on YouTube alone just in the past 90 days on this podcast. I mean, plus we're really fucking good at what we do. So that helped too. Plus the podcast format, it always presents opportunities to try something new. So like, for example, before, I got on with you, Gina, we were, Carter, Paul, and I were kind of talking about like, okay, how can we like spice up the podcast for 2026, do something different. So I'm actually going to try one of these on you right now, if it's okay. They give me an idea. I'm like, let's just do this. So I'm going to ask you a couple rapid fire questions, and you're going to, and I know after they said this, I was like, guys, this has been done before, but not by me. So it might be better. And I just want you to answer as quickly and honestly as you possibly can, just so we can maybe get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
All right. You ready?
The Ghost City Gauntlet.
The Ghost City Gauntlet. Here we go. Okay. Favorite haunted location?
Penhurst State Hospital.
Favorite ocean?
The Atlantic.
A book you would recommend to your child?
Interview with a Vampire.
Really?
Yeah.
How old are your kids? Do you have kids? I don't even know.
No, I don't have kids.
I was thinking
I don't have kids.
I'm like,
but please read it. It's good.
I'm like little 3-year-old Brenda, and you're like, here, read Interview with an Vampire. This is totally, and when we're done, we're going to watch the movie. See, I'm already fucking up the rapid fire question thing, guys. I'm totally sorry.
It was one of my favorite books, and I got in trouble for bringing it to school, and my mom had to defend me to my teacher in 5th grade, but it was a great book. So I recommend it.
Favorite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle?
Raphael.
Really?
Yeah.
He's a good one because he's a smart ass.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think
I grew
Raphael...
up with the Ninja Turtles.
Really?
Yes. I was born in 85.
Well, I think Raphael was my favorite too. Least favorite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle?
Leonardo.
Really? I was going to say Donatello.
I like Donatello.
He's
kind of funny. He's goofy.
And his weapon was the stupidest. It's a stick.
It was, yeah.
I mean, it's a staff.
But Leonardo was kind of bossy, and it was kind of dry, and he was always bringing everybody down. He was always trying to be so responsible.
That's what leaders do. Ask anybody who works for me.
No, but they were Teenage Ninja Turtles. It wasn't like, they were sitting at a board meeting.
Right. Well, that's true. I know. Can you consider Splinter? I mean, he wasn't a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, but like Splinter was kind of like, maybe I'm like Splinter for you guys, not Leonardo. I'm not the dry leader. I'm like the sage, the wise.
Or are you Shredder?
Ooh, I would like to be Shredder.
And they could be Bebop and Rocksteady.
I am very impressed. You know all these things about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I love that show. I'm telling you, I was a tomboy growing up, and I wanted to have a Ninja Turtle party, and my mom made me have like a princess party, and I was pissed because all of my little boyfriends that I was, not boyfriends, but boy friends, when I was, in preschool, they were all having Ninja Turtle themed parties, and I thought that was so cool, and I couldn't have one.
So a couple months ago, I went out and I bought all the original, I think it's the 88s, the figures, mint condition in the box. I'm not going to tell you what I paid for these, but now I have all 4 of the Ninja Turtles. Was it 86 or 88? I should know this, but I don't remember. But they're in mint condition, still in the box. And now they're like in the closet next to my Bob's Burgers stuff. Bob's
Burgers. Stop it. That is my favorite show in the world.
Okay.
Hands down.
All right. So now I have a place to go.
Trivia.
Yeah, now I have a place to go with rapid fire.
I was just on a Bob's Burgers podcast the other day.
Really?
Yes.
I had no idea. I really don't. You think I planned for this podcast? I didn't know your name until you popped up on the screen. I'm totally kidding. But no, Bob's Burgers. Okay. Favorite Bob's Burgers character?
Louise.
Really?
Yes.
I think that's like the obvious. See, and the whole idea is all rapid fire. I'm not supposed to have commentary on every answer, but I get it because a lot of people love Louise, and I think Louise is a great character. But I think I just relate to Bob too much. I'm like,
well, you telling me you want people to get off your lawn is very Bob's of you. That's a very Bob belcher attitude.
Yeah, and I want to like have a little garden and like,
Yes,
you know, all
that's
the little
him.
things.
This late English hat in his garden.
Yeah,
I'm
singing
the
to his
English
peas.
lady in my garden.
You know who I hate on Bob's
Who?
Burgers? Gene.
Really?
If Gene was my kid, I would leave him like in an alley somewhere. I mean, not really. I'm not, you know, a psychopath parent, but I would at least have that kid in some heavy counseling.
Yeah, he's a little nuts. And also, he's kind of like, he just goes along with everybody. He doesn't really ever think for himself or ever really do anything for himself. So I think that's fair.
All right, guys. So that was my first attempt at rapid fire questions. I don't know how well that went.
I think it was about as well as what you could hope for.
Yeah, I'm really bad at everything I do.
Aw.
Anyway, so you know, we talked about your book. I want to like, let's bring it back to you. Like, so what is the name of your book and where can people find it?
It's called Etched in Stone, Decoding Hidden Meanings in Cemeteries. And it is available on Amazon, and you can get it in a paperback or a Kindle.
Where else can you mention that you're on Instagram?
Yes. I'm on Instagram mainly under She Haunts. I also have a TikTok, but I will be honest, it's hard to keep up with the young folks on there. So I'm mostly an Instagram girly. And so I run my page, She Haunts, and I do, you know, paranormal content. I do cemetery photography, cemetery content. And I also run the page for my paranormal team, which is Afterlife All-Stars. And we're a team in South Florida that not only do we do investigations, but we also teach people how to investigate. So we do like a little paranormal boot camp, and we show folks how to use equipment, and then we investigate haunted locations. So, and all of the money collected for the ticket sales goes to the museums that we help. So it's a great fundraiser for them. Yes.
Well, last but not least, you know, kind of in line with what you just talked about, you know, there's a lot of people out there there's a lot more people that become interested in paranormal investigation all the time. You know, even though like the shows may not be on TV as much as they used to be and stuff, the idea of wanting to figure this out, or at least going out and having a journey, it's never going to stop appealing to people. So if you could give one or two pieces of advice to somebody who's thinking about going on their first paranormal investigation, what would it be?
I would say bring a friend. It's not really a good idea to go investigating by yourself because, you know, if you're in certain low lighting or old locations, you know, you have to think about safety. But also, if you have an experience, you want to be able to bounce that back to another person. So that's a good reason to bring a friend. I would say, you know, equipment is so much fun. I love my equipment, don't get me wrong, but you don't need to have a ton of equipment. You don't need to break the bank to get started. I would say your best thing that you can do is just turn your phone on airplane mode and have the recorder running or have video going, because you would not believe the amount of times that I've caught hidden EVPs in my videos. And, you know, using just the voice record app, you know, using your phone as a recorder in a dark room on like an iPhone, for example, you can see a little white line and it will blip if there's any talking. So even if you might not hear it with your own ears, you can play it back. You can see it happen in real time. So it's a great tool to use. And, you know, I would just say have fun with it because, you know, investigating is so much fun. It's a rush when you get something, but it's also, if you're, you know, with your friends and you're having a good time, it's just a fun activity to do with friends, I would say, you know, and if you do get evidence, share it. You know, that's the whole point of doing what we do, you know, investigating is to share our evidence and, you know, put it out there, see if anybody else thinks it's, you know, a haunted situation too. You know, I love getting feedback from people, and I'm happy when people debunk something. If I see something in a video and I point it out, hey, what do you guys see this too? Oh, I think it's this. I think it could be the air conditioning. Or, you know, it's good to have that healthy discourse online because that's the point of being an investigator. Is we're trying to push the field forward. So I would just say, don't be afraid to share, put yourself out there. There's a great community online that I've connected with, you know, just finding on Instagram, just finding people that are interested in the paranormal. And I've met some amazing people doing that. So definitely don't be shy and post.
And last but not least, what is the one mistake that you see people new to this hobby making all the time when they go on investigations?
So I would say, when you're in a location, you have to be aware of that location. Whenever we do, an official investigation, we do kind of like a sweep beforehand. And we will, with EMF readers, we'll find out where all of the electronics, where the outlets are, if there's, heavy activity in certain rooms versus others. We try to get to know the space. Is it have an old creaky floor? Are there old pipes? Those things might come up on an investigation and you could debunk them if you know about them. So, if you're sitting in a room and nobody's moving and you hear a popping sound, it could just be the house settling. It might not be, ghost footsteps. So it's important, I think, to really, visit a location during the day, get a lay of the land. And then if you're going to do an investigation at night or you're going to do an investigation, at least be aware of those things so that if it happens, that you can, debunk if it's debunkable. So
don't assume everything's a ghost.
Yeah. Don't assume everything is paranormal.
Yeah. Because it's usually not.
A lot of times it's not.
Right.
And that's a bummer, but we have to accept it.
Well, it's part of the game and it makes it even more exciting.
Special.
When you finally do get that piece of, that voice that it came from nowhere, but is answering a question you just asked. It makes it even the more better,
It is. It's like gold, or even like I've talked to some people, they're like, oh, it's like fishing. You're on the boat for hours and then you get one fish and it's so exciting. It's kind of like that. It's very calm, very chill. There's not a whole lot going on the whole night. And you might get 30 seconds of action, something lights up or somebody sees a shadow, but it is a very small amount. And just know that if you're watching these content creators online and they're showing you these videos, they've probably been on that location for hours and they're just showing you a very small window of what happened. So don't go into an investigation. I know I did that when I first got started and I'm going, what am I doing wrong? I'm not getting any evidence. But it takes time. It just takes time.
Yeah, you do it long enough, you are going to get something that makes you go, oh, holy shit.
Yes, you will have those moments for sure.
All right, Gina, well, I don't want to take too much of your time. You're like an hour ahead of me and like what is it, like 7:00 there? So, maybe you need to go like watch the Waltons or something. I don't know what you do in your evening. Bob's Burgers, something like that. But I really do appreciate you jumping on to talk about ghosts and your book and cemeteries and your journey in this space. So thank you very much. All right. Anything else you want to let people know about?
Well, if anybody would like to connect, you can find me online at shehaunts.com, or if you're on Instagram or TikTok, I'm at shehaunts.
Shehaunts. That sounds like something. I mean, I know that's like your thing, but shehaunts, it sounds like it could be like shehaunts. It's almost like a play on word like seance. A little bit.
Sounds like that a little bit.
Seance. Yeah. So maybe it's like I don't know, like a barbecue restaurant where you do seances.
Ooh, I like that. I like barbecue.
I'm a mind reader.
Are you hungry?
Like, yeah, I'm very hungry. I've been like trying to lose weight because I've been like a little fat. And I'm trying not to be a little fat anymore. So I had a turkey sandwich today. That was it. That's like the worst way to end this podcast, by the way. Like I'm literally like, hey, I had a turkey sandwich today. All right, Gina, nice to meet you. We'll talk to you next time. I feel like I need to ask a whole other question, but I don't have one. But all right, well, on that note, Gina, it's been a lot of fun talking to you. And I'm going to take a note not to end a podcast that way again. And
well, Tim, I really appreciate coming on, and I loved all the questions and the rapid fire and keeping me on my toes.
Well, I can promise you one thing: if you ever come back, write another book, you come back, we'll talk about it, whatever. I promise you, my rapid fire questions will actually be questions instead of me criticizing all your answers. How dare you pick Leonardo? What are you talking about? Anyways, all right, Gina. Well, it was really good talking to you, and
thank you.
Maybe we'll see you soon.
Hope so. Thank you.
This episode was brought to you by Ghost City Tours, your guide to the haunted side of history in over 25 cities nationwide. From restless spirits to unsolved mysteries, our tours bring the dead back to life. Book now for a haunted city near you at ghostcitytours.com. Be sure to subscribe to the Ghost City Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, stay spooky.